Blazer Victory podcast. This is your co-host, John Duncan, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Steve Irvine. And Steve, we've got a huge game on our hands this Saturday down in Athens against those Georgia Bulldogs. It's going to be a tough task, but hey, another good chance of getting some national spotlight for this UAB program on ESPN2. But how's it going over there, Steve?
I mean, it's all good. I'm excited, like everybody else, for this challenge. I mean, it's certainly a huge challenge, in a lot of ways, and it's going to be fun. I mean, it's going to be you like to get you like tests like this. You like to be you like to have good health after the test like this. And but
Definitely.
especially with a conference game coming up next week, and a conference opener, and but you can't look. I can't look to that one right now. You got to look to this one, and it'll be a fun afternoon.
Definitely. And guys, I was able to have a chance to interview Rusty Mansell from 247 Sports and Dawgs247. He does a great job on there, covering Georgia and also just national, recruiting. But he also has a podcast called the Junkyard Dogcast that he does with Jake Rowe and Kip Adams. I've been able to give them a listen a couple of times lately, especially. And they all do a great job covering Georgia for 247. But you will get to hear that interview in just a little bit. But Steve and I, as always, are going to kind of, just set up what Saturday is going to look like for UAB. And this game, is going to be 2:30 p.m. Central Time. And as I mentioned earlier, is going to be televised on ESPN2. But, of course, as always, you can listen locally on Jocks 94.5 FM with David Crane, Steve, and Trey Ragland on the call. Now, some news just did break, literally right before we started recording, Steve, and it was from Dawgs247. Evidently, starting quarterback for Georgia, JT Daniels, you all know the name, is dealing with injury, and he is actually questionable right now for the UAB game. It looks like it was an upper body injury, like an oblique or rib injury. So he is questionable for Saturday. Now, what that means is that the backup quarterback that Kirby Smart did say during his press conference is going to be Carson Beck, the redshirt freshman. Now, Carson Beck has not played in a college football game. He did play in their spring game, but, you really can't take a whole lot from the spring game. He ended up going 22 of 31 for just over 200 yards passing and got a couple touchdowns. But again, that was a spring game. And Steve, I texted you before we started recording, and I said you might think that I'm crazy after we do our preview, but I think that there's a chance. I'm not saying there's a large chance, but UAB's got a shot in this ball game. Now, especially with if JT Daniels doesn't play, and I don't see him playing at all. Like if it's that serious, they're definitely going to hold him out for the UAB game and possibly get him ready for South Carolina, or I think they've got Vanderbilt after that. They might hold him out a couple weeks, to be honest. So I kind of expect Beck or the other guy to start for Georgia, and I don't know, Steve. I mean, he's a talented guy, but with that inexperience, and also you guys will get to hear my interview with Rusty in a little bit, where there's some inexperience on the offensive line too. So, Steve, you can go ahead and tell me how crazy I am, but I think we've got a shot, man.
Well, I mean, here's my way of thinking. You always have a shot. I mean,
Right.
if there's two teams there, I always have a shot. I personally think I don't know anything about it. I personally think JT Daniels will at least be ready. I mean, I really think I believe and I don't know, maybe he won't, but he'll be ready. If he's not, I think that Carson Beck has not played, but in a college game, but he's still got a lot of talent, and honestly, it may just change the way they do things. Now, if you don't, obviously they're a better football team when JT Daniels is in the game. Plain and simple, that's been proven. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Right. But with in a game like this, when they probably feel like they have UAB outmanned a little bit physically, size wise particularly, it just might change the way they do things. You might see a more trying to establish a running game a little more than you would have if JT Daniels was in there, and and they also have Stetson Bennett behind them, who's played a lot of snaps, behind Beck,
Yeah.
and now he obviously didn't have the success that JT Daniels did when he got in there, but he's played a lot of snaps, so they have an experienced guy. Yeah, they have a guy back there at least. But one thing that Coach Clark has always talked about, complained about a little bit when in games and when UAB plays against SEC schools, he feels like the officials a lot of times will let them kind of get away a little bit with some holding and basically use their physical, just kind of hold on and just grind it out, and getting away with some stuff, physically, and so, that could be their approach. I mean, they, if they don't have JT Daniels, but I mean, it also, Carson Beck could come and throw the ball around the yard too. I mean, you just don't know. He's a backup quarterback at Georgia. He's got to be pretty good. He's got to have some talent, not experience, but talent. So I don't know, I don't know what to make of it. Again, I know that Georgia's better with JT Daniels. If he doesn't play, I think that gives UAB a better chance to win, no doubt. But we'll see. We'll see on Saturday what happens. And I think if he doesn't play, if he doesn't play, and UAB can do a good job against the running game, then Georgia's in trouble. Offensively.
Right.
Offensively, but as they've proven, they can win games with their defense against a really good team.
We'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's intriguing, no doubt. But we'll just see what happens, on Saturday, and and for them before Saturday, getting who they're getting ready, and it's kind of fun to sit back and watch it, no doubt.
Definitely. And then I'm actually, making the trip over to Athens this Saturday. So I'm excited to, see the campus and see downtown Athens and everything. So
it's great.
Gonna have fun regardless, man.
Yeah, it's a great town, great stadium, great atmosphere. I've been there, a few times and have never had anything but, a good time there, and so it's going to be, fun. And, again, it's, a challenging game, but it's going to be certainly something that some good memories are made.
Definitely. Now, before we switch over to the preview and the defensive side of the ball for the Bulldogs, I do want to just kind of give my take on what I do think that Georgia is going to try to do to UAB. And it's kind of what you just mentioned earlier, Steve. I think they're going to try to get Zamir White going in that run game and get the run game established against the UAB defense. And honestly, that's what they were able to do against Clemson. I mean, the final score last week to the Clemson game, Georgia just won 10-3. They did not have a single offensive touchdown in that game. The only touchdown in that game was a pick six that Georgia returned, for a touchdown, obviously. But I mean, they really just kind of established on both sides of the ball, the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And, Zamir White ended up having 13 carries for 74 yards. I mean, that was just, what do you call it? One of those old school football games, just ground and pound. And that's exactly what Georgia, did to Clemson. And I definitely can see them trying to establish the run game early on against UAB. But I mean, we've talked before, Steve, our defensive line is deep. Now it's obviously, a group of five defense, but I think, if we could stop them early and gain some momentum, I think that we'll be able to kind of dictate how Georgia wants to play this game. And if an inexperienced quarterback ends up having to take some shots, and, I'm really, confident with our secondary as well. I think maybe we can force them into mistakes and try to get some, turnovers and try to convert those turnovers into points. Now, on the defensive side of the ball for Georgia, that front seven, man, and you'll hear me and Rusty talk about it in a minute, but I mean, I think this is hands down the best front seven in college football right now. They are just talented.
Oh, they're incredible, and there's certainly no way that UAB or probably a lot of teams are going to see as good a guy up front, a run stuffer type guy as Jordan Davis. I mean, Jordan Davis is, I mean, he's an NFL guy right now, and
Oh yeah.
be huge, makes plays. He allows others to make plays by as many guys you have to you have to use blocking him, and then they got Devontae Wyatt right next to him who's 6'3", 315. So he's another big dude in the middle that and that's just the inside guys, and then obviously Adam Anderson coming coming off through Nolan Smith at the jack, Quay Walker, Channing Tindall, Trayvon Walker. I mean, you just go down the list. I mean, it's just it's amazing how good, and they're deep there too now. They got some a lot of guys that can play, and and the one thing they do too is, as good as they are in that front seven, they're really well coached, and they really have some different ways of creating pressure.
Right.
I think that's one thing that hurt Clemson. I thought, watching Clemson, I thought Clemson was confused a lot, and and when you get confused against guys this talented, you're in trouble.
Yeah,
I mean, because you can't make a mistake and think you're going to get away with it. If when you're confused, and these guys will make you pay. So that's a huge challenge, and I think it's a huge challenge to me, especially that UAB, I really feel, needs to at least be able to run the ball some.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they're going to be able to run the ball. I mean, it's a defense that a year ago led the nation in rushing defense, and we'll do it again this year probably. So I don't think you don't go in the game going, okay, we're going to win this game by running the football only.
No.
You just don't. But I do think that they have to have some sort of ability to run, or that ability to run, but also ability to use maybe the short passing game sometimes as your running game. Getting the quick stuff out and getting something out of it, instead of to kind of keep from the sacks and that kind of thing. Because there's a defense that, I mean, they had 7 sacks a week ago, 8 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. In a bowl game last year against Cincinnati, they had 8 sacks and 12 tackles for loss. So, they're going to get after you. And so you're going to have to use that short pass game a little bit as your running game. But I do think it's just really important that there's some semblance of a running game. That you just can't. I don't think you can rely on just dropping back and just throwing the ball. Because I think one thing that SEC teams have often done against UAB and probably a lot of group of 5 teams is they'll put those safeties back deep and say, okay, you're not throwing over the top of us.
Yep.
You have to beat us by running the ball, or we're going to man up on the outside and see what you can do. And so I think that I think you'll see a lot of that. You'll see those 2 safeties deep and just try to make sure that you don't give up anything cheap, and see if UAB can drive the ball. Hey, UAB's capable. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, they're capable of doing some good things. I do think it's going to be very important in this game. I love the job that Bryant Vincent did against Jacksonville State. I thought he did a great job of play calling. He did a great job of game planning, and he's going to have to do that again. I mean, you're not just going to line up and say, okay, you're going to beat this. I need you to beat this guy, this corner, like you talked to receiver. I need you, I need you to beat him man on man, and that's, that's it. I mean, you're going to have to really do a good job of coming up with some routes that are going to get guys open, by the routes, and certainly capable of it. I thought he did a great job of that against Jacksonville State, and so we'll see. I mean, it's a challenge, but it's a fun challenge, And I'll tell you what, I'm really interested to see how Dwayne McBride reacts to this situation. Hold
on to the ball, please.
Yeah, I mean, coming off a week when he dropped the ball twice, and playing at SEC Stadium against the best rush defense in the country. I look forward to see how he reacts to that.
Right.
And I think he'll react well. But you just never know till you're put in that situation. but it's going to be fun to watch. To me, I mean, it's going to be, one of the stories of the game to me. And then also up front, just seeing the job that I mean, we've talked a lot about how good UAB is up front, and they are. They're very good.
Oh yeah.
They won't have a challenge like this the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So it'll be. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they handle a challenge like this. I mean,
And
it's
they're excited. They're
oh,
excited.
absolutely. I mean, this is what you want to do. It's I mean, you don't want everything to be easy. I mean,
No.
you just don't. You want it to be a challenge, and this is a challenge. I mean, I'm telling you, Jordan Davis. I mean, I'm sitting. On Saturday, I'll be sitting. You know, 200 yards, 300 yards away from him, or whatever, and
Hmm.
sitting in the sky, and I'm still having nightmares about him. I mean, I'm already having nightmares about him, and I don't even have to block him or
Right.
be near him, and I'm having nightmares about him. So that's how good this guy is. And so yeah, it's just I just think there's just so many fun challenges in this thing for UAB that it's just just looking forward to see how they react to it.
Yeah, I can't wait to get down there and see what happens. Now, one thing too, Steve, that I think that Vincent will try to do that, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember them doing this against Jacksonville State, but I could definitely see them running a lot more screens, against Georgia, because, hurry up, maybe try to, get the ball out, maybe catch them, blitzing, or just try to catch them sleeping, because I really don't think we ran a single screenplay in that Jacksonville State game. I mean, our listeners will correct me too if I'm wrong, but I don't remember seeing a screenplay.
Yeah, I don't remember that being certainly wasn't a big part of the game plan. I don't remember if there was one or not, but that's going to be the kind of thing that you have to make happen. And I think you have some guys that can make that happen. Uh, I think I think the one thing that I thought UAB did a little more of against Jacksonville State that than they did last year and last couple of years is kind of the eye candy stuff, the moving guys and
Right.
just kind of taking just obviously with Rajay Johnson Sanders, kind of doing the jet sweep look, and I think there's going to be a lot of movement type of stuff too to try to put some pressure on him, you know try to confuse him a little bit. But yeah, I think the quick game has got to have to be a big part of it. Because it's just I don't think that these guys are too good up front to just think you're gonna, there was times against Jacksonville State where Tyler had a lot of time. There was a time
Yes.
where Ryan Davis came all the way across the field, and made a catch. And I think Prince might have did the same thing at one point. And just there was a lot of on one of Shropshire's catches when they went three receivers to one side, and he basically, they they made it look like it was all three were going deep on it, and then he cut to the sideline behind the other two. Those things take a long time to, little time to develop.
Yeah.
You're not going to have that kind of luxury for the most part.
Mm-mm.
You're going to have to do that some, but for the most part, you're not going to have that kind of luxury. And so,
Definitely.
you got to get it out. I mean, and and the other thing that kind of the pressure that UAB puts on you on the perimeter with the big with the big jack linebackers and ends and Sam linebackers and that kind of thing. This is kind of these guys are long too. Georgia's very long on the outside, so that puts pressure on Tyler, or Dylan Hopkins or Lucero, whoever's playing, to
Hmm.
that takes kind of an option away, getting a little quick thing outside sometimes, because it's hard to get it over those guys. So that's a challenge. There's just so many challenges here that you don't see, and certainly on a typical Conference USA weekend. So
Right.
so so it's just some things that just some challenges there, and again, you got to be crazy if you're not looking forward to it.
Right. And, just going over, a quick weakness that Georgia might have on the defensive side of the ball is their secondary, with their DBs. So if Tyler can just get a couple seconds to hold, if the line can hold up for just a few seconds and maybe try and take some shots, then, I definitely like us. our chances in this game. But also on the offensive side of the ball, Georgia's kind of weak at wide receiver. They've got some walk-ons playing. Now they do have a very talented tight end, Brock Bowers, who was targeted the most in the Clemson game. He had 6 catches for 43 yards. So look for them to, look for Bowers again in this UAB game for Georgia. But I don't know, Steve. I can't wait to, just get down there, see him play between the hedges and just see what happens. And, hey, guys, we'll be back in a few days to have our instant reaction podcast. So, if I'm right, you're going to be like, wow, that John Duncan guy was actually, a pretty smart guy. He saw this coming, or he's going to be like, man, what an idiot.
Yeah.
So,
well, hey, it's easy to call somebody an idiot afterwards. I mean, hey,
yeah.
you got to be confident going in, no matter who, no matter what, and
Right.
I'm certainly. I'll just say this for the record. I'm certainly not as confident as you are, but but you never know. I mean, go out and play it. I mean, that's the one thing. The one thing I like about this, about UAB in this situation is you don't have a team that's going to be awed by the situation.
Right.
I mean, you don't have a team that's going to walk in there and look around and go, oh my gosh, look where we are. And, I mean, you have a veteran team who played a lot of games, had a lot of success, played some of these games, certainly never won one of these, or really never came close to winning one, but they're not going to be overcome by the moment, and I think there's been times where, there's been a couple teams that might have been overcome by the moment a little bit in a big setting like this. And, so I do think there's that. I do think that's something you can hang on to a little bit, Now I do think, home crowd wise or being on the road wise, I think this is the biggest challenge they've had at SEC Stadium.
Yes.
Since the return, because
Mm-hmm.
you look at, Texas A&M obviously is a tough place to play, but that night, I mean, there was the upper deck was maybe a quarter filled, maybe a half filled. I mean, it wasn't a typical night there.
No.
Certainly Tennessee, when they played Tennessee, were going through some tough times. So they didn't have a great crowd. The Florida game in 18 or 17.
Yeah, they were struggling.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it was. I mean, these are good crowds and loud crowds. Don't get me wrong, but they're not what they could be.
Right.
I think in this case, this might be the first time that you go into a place that's going to be full and amped up and is as excited as they get. Other than the big, if Alabama was in town or an SEC game type thing.
Yeah,
But
right.
I mean, it's going to be full and loud. So I think I think that's the biggest challenge that they've had since the return, certainly. Crowd wise, and opposing stadium wise. Not that any of those were easy. This is just a little different, and so that there is that. But going back to the first point was, I just think that there's nobody on this UAB roster that's going to be overwhelmed by the moment. I just don't think there is. I mean, there's a couple young guys, the Mac Williams and a couple young guys that maybe not have been quite in this situation, but I just don't see them being overwhelmed by it, and that's encouraging. It really is.
Definitely, and it's going to be a lot different than that Miami game was last year. Also, too.
Totally different. I mean, it's night and day. I mean, it's night and day.
Yes. Well, guys, we are excited, to get down there to Athens this Saturday, and if you're unable to make the trip, make sure and tune in on ESPN2. 2:30, UAB Georgia on ESPN2. But also get your radio out. Pull out your iHeartRadio, whatever UAB app, and tune in to David Crane, Steve Irvine, and Trey Ragland on the call. And we just can't wait to get over there and get the ball kicked off, and hope that our Blazers, can go in there and play well, which we both think that they are capable of doing that. But without further ado, I am going to go ahead and play my interview that I had with Rusty Mansell. And just thanks again, Rusty, for coming on. But we'll be back after the game for a reaction. See you guys later. Well, all right, guys, welcome back to the Blazer Victory Podcast. This is your host, John Duncan, and I am pleased to be joined by Rusty Mansell of 247 and Dawgs247. And he also has a great podcast that he does with Jake Rowe and Kip Adams. They all do a great job on Dawgs247, but especially on that Junkyard Dogcast podcast. But Rusty, welcome aboard to the Blazer Victory podcast. Thank you for setting some time aside to, out of your busy schedule to make some time with me this evening.
Yeah, man. I look forward to it. I've actually been in Birmingham recently, probably a couple of weeks ago, and I came up by UAB, just coming off the directions, and ran by. That's the first time I'd seen their practice facility. Nice new outdoor practice facility. It's covered, like semi-covered type deal, but it looks pretty good. And there was a couple blocks over, a really good pizza place on the corner, and I can't remember what it was, but it was right off the UAB campus downtown, and snuck in some good pizza. Don't tell my wife, but it was a good little trip to Birmingham.
Well, good. And I know, you could tell, just coming in this time, to Birmingham and at UAB especially, just, we've got this nice new practice facility, very nice new stadium, that we get to kick it off October 2nd against Liberty. Did you have a chance to drive?
I did not
by it and see the new stadium?
I actually went to see Hoover practice because Hoover played, and now I remember why I was there. Hoover played in the Corky Kell kickoff classic over in Mercedes-Benz. I went over to watch practice. Yeah, that was why I was over there. So didn't get a chance to see their new stadium, but definitely heard a lot about it. And I know there's some buzz around UAB and a big win last week on national TV to kick off college football. It was awesome. I watched about 3/4 of that game, and very, very physical team. And I know they got looks like things rolling in the right direction. And when you get a new stadium, it just creates so much more energy, so much more buzz around your program, and your kids are excited. And, they got a big opportunity then, but they got a really big opportunity Saturday in Athens.
Yes, definitely, excited for our Blazers to go down to Athens and take on the Bulldogs of Georgia. And, another national spotlight for UAB.
Sure.
This game's going to be on ESPN2. So that's, Georgia's used to the spotlight, but this is great for, UAB to get another nationally televised game. And, I don't know if you keep up much with Conference USA, but, a lot of our games end up on Facebook and on these weird, channels. But it's great. It's definitely great to have another game on ESPN for sure. Now, Rusty, I did want to just ask you very quickly, going off of Kirby Smart's press conference for the UAB game, he didn't, he went straight into it and said that he has a lot of respect for Bill Clark and the UAB program. Do you think is that just him giving coach speak, or do you really think Kirby, has the respect for UAB, what he said? And also, even going before the press conference, post game of the Clemson game, he said that, quote, that they have a really tough game coming up against UAB. So do you think that's just coach speak, or do you really think he feels that?
No, he certainly feels that. I know that Kirby spent a lot of time, obviously, in the state of Alabama, and with and he knows Bill Clark well. And there's certain tendencies now that we've covered Kirby Smart for so long. There's, I won't beat around the bush. I call it the shortest handshake in the history of college football every year when Dan Mullen plays Kirby Smart. I mean, they don't sit around and chum it up. They don't try to defend it, try to hide it. They'll shake each other's hand, and they don't take but a second. You know what I mean? And
right.
For him to speak the way he did on Bill Clark and to talk about UAB, before he left the field, Clemson tells you that he knows what's coming up. And in this day and age, it's one of those things where you work all off season, and you have a group of guys that have they've already game planned for UAB. They've watched every tape, and they'll just add to what they saw from Jacksonville State. So, it's not like this is a Kirby Smart's going to sit down on Sunday and take a look at some tapes on UAB. You spend a week, in the off season, you watch UAB from offensive side, you watch them from a defensive side. You got 100 freaking analysts in the building at some of these SEC schools. So
yeah,
these guys watch tape year round. So they probably have a pretty good idea, but he also has enough to know that, hey, they're very well coached. They're very physical. And, from watching that because I know Jack State, I know that program pretty well. And I know a lot of guys that I covered in high school that are over there. Sean Brown, Tennessee transfer, and some of those guys are over there. Their quarterback, covered him in high school, transfer from Clemson. So I know they have a lot of transfers over there. So to see what UAB did to them, that got my attention. I know it got the Georgia staff and the Georgia players certainly probably their attention as well.
Definitely. And also, with the Jacksonville State UAB connection, Coach John Gross under Jacksonville State,
Sure.
he coached under Clark. So there's a lot of intertwine between both coaching staffs. So it just even goes to show even more of, the dominant effort that UAB, gave on their shutout victory, 31-0 over Jacksonville State. But can you talk to us a little bit about that dominating front seven that we got to see from Georgia against Clemson? I mean, they just pretty much shut down Clemson's offense. Can you talk us just a little bit about their front seven of Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have not danced around it, in our podcast and some of the interviews I've done in the past 2 weeks. And I've said, I don't know how long you have watched Georgia football. I don't know how long you've been a fan, people that are fans of Georgia, but I promise you, I'm not sure they've ever had a front seven like this, ever. Now, they've had great players and a group of them, but as far as the total position by position, and I started catching wind of it, and some of the best sources, and they don't just talk to anybody. It takes years to meet these people and kind of get their trust, so I can't really rat them out or use everything, but there was a ton of buzz among the NFL scouts. And what August is for the NFL scouts, they get to go to every practice. They'll go to Georgia, then they'll go to Clemson, then they'll go to South Carolina, then they'll go to UAB in Middle Tennessee. They make that swing before the season starts so they can get all their information and get back to the NFL and start working on their reports and everything. But I started talking to some scouts, and there were some guys like saying some really unique things, I would say, about Georgia and what they look like up front. And I knew that Clemson wasn't the strongest offensive line group. I didn't know that Georgia was going to basically shut them out. Field goal here or there, but they dominated. That they're big. I mean, Jordan Davis he's 6'7", 340. Devontae White is, I think he ran a 4.8 flat at 310 pounds. Trayvon Walker, 6'5", 250. Here's a kid that can run a 4.6. I mean, they're freaky there. Now, I don't know how good their secondary is. They're all highly recruited. But the best thing I can say about their secondary is their best friend is that defensive line and those linebackers, because they bring a ton of pressure on you. And, I think looking at Georgia, you got to have a guy that can move, because if you sit back there and you're kind of a stationary guy, and DJ can move a little bit, but he's not a Deshaun Watson. He's not a Trevor Lawrence. He doesn't bring that type of element. And when they know where you're going to be and you start letting those guys pin their ears back, that's how you end up with 7 sacks and a ton of pressure. So, I'm sure UAB knows we got to move our guy. We got to move him out of the pocket. We can't let him sit back there. We're not going to be able to hold him long. So that's how they impact you with that front seven, because it is elite and it doesn't take but a second.
And I guess, you did kind of answer this, but would you say that this is the best front seven that Kirby has had at Georgia?
No question. And they've had some really good players, but what they've got, they had Roquan Smith and they had all these guys in that 2017 that played a national championship, and they just were a really good group together, but individually they weren't, those guys weren't, you go back and look at that starting lineup. I think maybe 1 or 2 of those guys are still left in NFL, and which is hard to believe, but you look at what they got. I mean, these are first round draft picks, what they've got up there. Jordan Davis is going to be a first round draft pick. Trayvon Walker, probably a first round draft pick. Devontae White, second round, probably. Quay Walker, linebacker. Many people think he could be a first round draft pick. So they could potentially be playing with 4 or 5 first or second round draft picks right now with these guys. And then you bring in Jalen Carter, who is a 5-star, who is sitting behind Jordan Davis. And I think Jalen Carter is going to be a first round draft pick next year. So they're sitting there with a lot of ammo up front, and it's big athletic guys.
Well, let's switch over to the offensive side of the ball and kind of talk very quickly about the offensive line. Unfortunately, we did hear, Tate Ratledge is unfortunately out for the rest of the year with a foot injury. Can you tell us what you think that they might do, maybe, against UAB on the offensive line? Would they rotate another guy in, or what do you foresee happening this Saturday?
I think they're going to, because what they did Saturday night, they put their backup center, who was actually hurt, who couldn't snap with his right hand, but could play. So they took him and moved him to right guard. Now I don't grade tape, so I don't really know how he played, but in the pinch, they had to have a player that had some experience. Now, they got a 5-star left tackle, a guy named Broderick Jones. It's a redshirt freshman, one of the most highly recruited players in the country, big 6'6", athletic dude. They played a couple of reps, I believe. So my opinion, they'll probably take Jamari Salyer, who played left tackle, and move him down to guard and just bump the other guard over, Justin Schaefer, to take Ratledge's spot, and probably I think UAB might see a kid playing on the left tackle. This is his first collegiate start. Now, I don't know they'll do that the first series, but at some time on Saturday, I truly believe that Broderick Jones is going to play. I think he was number 2 rated offensive tackle coming out of high school for a reason. Big athletic basketball player, just freaky athlete when you think about, lineman and SEC, that type of thing. So we'll see, but obviously that's an unknown. And I think that's a situation where, if you're UAB and you're going to bring some pressure and stuff, you're going to put him in some spots to see if he can pick up those twists and those types of things. And you'll test him pretty soon to get in the game.
Definitely. And, you mentioned he's a big guy, 5-star, but hey, lacks college experience. So, maybe that is something that UAB maybe can try to kind of rush that side a little more and try some different stunts. So that'll be definitely something that we'll have to keep an eye out for Saturday. Also on the offensive side of the ball, I know that unfortunately Georgia had a lot of injuries on the wide receiver, in fall camp and leading up to Clemson. Do you foresee anybody maybe stepping up this game against UAB for the Georgia? Because I know it looks like they targeted the tight end Brock Bowers the most in the Clemson game. Do you see maybe Jalen Johnson stepping up, or who do you think can take that next step in the UAB game?
That's a very good question. Who's going to be there? But I know that they're going to take more chances down the field. They have to. You can't. They may be able to let's just be honest. They may be able to, for lack of a better word, suffocate UAB defensively and keep this they can do that and win a game, 20-10 or something, without a lot of offensive output. Now, with that, they've got to get back to taking some shots down the field. And I think he starts with a guy like Arian Smith. Here's a guy that ran a 10-100 in the national championships in track. He's a 10-1 guy. He was in the 10 fastest guys in college sports. So he went to Oregon and raced, and he's a 10-1, laser time guy. So that's a guy that would worry you a little bit in space. And then they got some other players. So they are still a little bit banged up. I don't anticipate Darnell Washington back. That's a guy that you have to deal with at 6'8". I don't expect him back this week. But Brock Bowers is a guy that obviously JT Daniels looks comfortable with. So we'll look at that. But I certainly think that Georgia's going to take more chances down the field and try to get their passing game more in rhythm. Then you got 2 guys, 2 hammers basically, and Samir White and Kendall Milton. For Kendall Milton, he ran over the safety for Clemson. You don't ever want anyone hurt. But that kid had to have shoulder surgery today. He's out for the year. Running back runs you over an injured year. That's a grown man coming at you. So,
right.
It just kind of gives you the power of those 2 big guys. So Georgia can run the ball, but I think that you got to be able to throw it, and you got to work on those things. So it'd be interesting to see how they attack UAB, because I know defensively last week I was extremely impressed at how fast UAB seemed to be. They kind of fly the ball. I felt like they gang tackled, and they smothered Jacksonville State, and that's not that's a lot, because I know the rivalry between those 2 teams. I know the connections. I know that was a big game. It was a good crowd down in Montgomery. So it'd be interesting to see how Georgia tries to attack UAB offensively.
Definitely. And you kind of mentioned that, about Georgia having to take shots against UAB. I think it's going to be, on the UAB side, we're going to have to take shots on that Georgia defense and try to, kind of try and pick on that secondary if we can. I feel like they did a good job against Clemson. But we talked about that front 7 of Georgia. Hopefully Tyler Johnston can have a few seconds to hurry up and get rid of that ball, or like you were saying, or get a rollout or something. Yeah,
you got to come in swinging, and you gotta just you gotta take your shots, and it is what it is. And when it's kind of coach speak, but here's the thing: you got to be in this thing. You got to make this game somehow comfortable, somehow close in the fourth quarter. And that's what you got to do for UAB, and anything can happen at that point. You don't want to be physically beat up. You want to leave this game healthy, and you want to get it to the fourth quarter, and all the pressure would be on Georgia at that point.
Definitely. Well, Rusty, it was a pleasure. I just want to thank you again for coming on, guys. If you're not already following Rusty Mansell on Twitter, definitely give him a follow at Mansell247, and give Dawgs247 a follow at Dawgs247. And again, check out their podcast with Jake Rowe, Kip Adams, and Rusty. They do a great job on the Junkyard Dogcast. But thanks again, Rusty, so much for coming on. And guys, we'll be back to give you a recap on what happens down in Athens with the Georgia Bulldogs and the UAB Blazers. But we'll see you guys next time. Go Blazers.